Over the past week, I've been noticing a number of headlines like this one. Buyers are noticing the quality of these pickup trucks right away. Or, this Jeep is now the highest quality truck on the market. Or, worst yet, this one, you'll never guess what the most reliable mid-size pickup truck in America in 2025 is. I'm going to take a deep breath, we'll roll the intro, and then we'll talk about why that headline, especially, is a bunch of horseshit. Yep, that's right. Today we are talking about the J.D. Power survey, probably the least understood survey results that you see bandied around in headlines all over the place. And I know a reasonable amount about this, not just because I've been researching IQS and VDS surveys for a while, not to mention their appeal survey, but because I have been surveyed by J.D. Power actually a few times. Because as you know, we buy our own long-term vehicles here at Auto Buyer's Guide. And we got this survey because we bought a Volvo EX30 with our own cold hard cash. Well, leased one at any rate. So we're going to talk about what's on the survey, why this is not a reliability study like most people are talking about, and why I think J.D. Power is doing themselves a disservice. Even though I do like the theory of what they're doing, they do themselves a disservice by the way they describe their own surveys sometimes. For the history lesson here, we have to go back to talk about how J.D. Power started. It started in 1968. It was founded by James David Power and his family, and he was a former advertising and customer research employee for Ford Motor Company. He realized that there was a bit of a gap in the market because customers were complaining about things. He heard them complaining about things in customer surveys. Internally, he didn't think that there was enough weight added to them, so he wanted to do something about that, and he thought that customer research, customer satisfaction research, could be done in a better way. Now, the key and most important thing about J.D. Power and their surveys is that I would argue, I don't know if they would agree with this, but I would argue that you are not the target customer for J.D. Power's research. And that's because of really what J.D. Power is researching and how this data is used. This is the core fundamental thing to know about the IQS, the appeal study, and VDS. IQS is initial quality. VDS is the vehicle dependability study, that is after 3 years of ownership. And then the appeal study is kind of like a how do I feel about my car? How appealing are these features and what do customers want in cars, etc. Although all of these surveys definitely have some of those qualities in them. The big thing is J.D. Power is collecting this data from customers. They even hand you a dollar bill. They mail one with you or with their survey there, so that way you can get encouraged to fill out the survey. Apparently that really works. If you've seen that trick employed here and there, J.D. Power is one of the first companies to do that, and that's what's going on. At any rate, once they have all the data, they then compile it, and then they will sell that data back to new car manufacturers so they can try and fix problems early before they become actual reliability problems later, so they can identify maybe what's causing a squeak or a rattle or something like that that customers might be complaining about, and so they can generally improve their products. That's the entire concept here. Then J.D. Power takes the data, fiddles with it, sorts it, combines it, does their own math with it, and then they create the rankings that you have probably seen here. This is the 2025 IQS result, or the initial quality study. You'll notice that Lexus is on the top, Nissan is number 2, Jaguar is quite high up there, Jeep is above average, and what else seems a little bit unusual about this? You might be surprised to see that some brands you might have thought would be better are a little bit lower on the list, like Toyota, down there well below the study average. That's because this is not a reliability study. IQS is initial quality, and while some of us might be thinking that quality means reliability, means things that are broken on the vehicle, when you actually take the IQS survey, you will realize this has a lot to do with customer satisfaction, satisfaction with the vehicle, a little bit of dealer experience effectively in there, and some vibes, I guess you could say. When I filled out the survey online, I meant to record it. Unfortunately, my screen grabber software accidentally had a hiccup and it recorded nothing, and then I couldn't go back and retake the survey. So instead, let's talk about the kinds of things that are on the IQS survey and why it is not reliability. The first thing is it has to do with the first 90 days of ownership of your vehicle. And there is a time frame by which you need to fill out the survey. So this survey, a link was only good until May 5th, for instance. It asks you how satisfied you are overall with your car. Have you experienced any mechanical issues? This is the one place where maybe you could call it reliability. It asks you about paint and finish. It asks you whether you would recommend the car to your friends and family. It asks you about the infotainment system. It asks you a whole host of questions that are not really about, did my car break? Did it not do something the way that it's supposed to do? In fact, some of the questions are simply, do you like the way that some of these features function? And that is a problem when the answer, or the result of this, I should say, is a ranking where they describe it as problems per 100 vehicles. And this is probably my core complaint about the way that J.D. Power is kicking themselves in the butt by the way they're describing their own survey. Because if I don't like the way my shifter stock works on my EX30, or I'm not the biggest fan of the turn signal stock and the windshield wiper switch arrangement, or actual reality, I'm not the biggest fan of the way the HVAC controls are done in the touchscreen infotainment system, that's a problem on this result. But it's not really a problem because it's not like it's broken. It works as intended. I just don't like the way that it was intended. And by all appearances, there is a reasonable amount of this in the IQS data because according to this, the study average is 1.9 problems on average per car in the first 90 days. I don't know about you, but I have owned a decent number of cars. We buy new cars here all the time. It's very rare for them to actually have a problem in the first 90 days. So a lot of these rankings are simply, do you like the way that it drives? Do you like the way that it looks? Do you like the way that the interior is laid out? Are the seats comfortable? Does it not squeak and rattle, etc.? But that's not really a problem in the way that a lot of consumers assume that it is. Or, of course, the article's authors that we're talking about here, where they are definitely conflating reliability with this survey's results. Even some of these where they're just talking about noticing the quality of these trucks, that's a little bit tricky because so much of this is not quantitative result, it's qualitative. Do I like this? Are the seats comfortable, etc.? Is that quality in the way that a lot of people are assuming it is? Not necessarily. The other study you see cited regularly is the J.D. Power VDS, or Vehicle Dependability Study. They recently released one earlier this year, February 13th, 2025, and it's a 2025 VDS study, because that's the one for this year, but they're talking about 2022 model year vehicles, because the VDS is talking about problems that happened in the third year of ownership. And that third year is critical, because it's only capturing that year. If you had an engine failure year 1, a transmission failure year 2, but your car was golden year 3, then it wouldn't appear in the VDS because we're, again, just talking about year 3. Now, this is still pretty valuable data, I would argue, because in a lease cycle, most people lease their vehicles for about 3 years that choose to lease their vehicles. This is going to tell you about that final year of the lease and what could have gone wrong with the most miles on it that customer would interact with. Remember that even though the average new car on the road in America today is somewhere over 13 years old, the first owner doesn't own it for that entire time. A huge number of vehicles are leased. If we're talking luxury branded vehicles, many of them are leased at a rate of over 50%, and even mainstream vehicles are seeing significantly higher lease rates than before. And again, those terms are generally about 3 years. So it does make an awful lot of sense. But this study, again, is not simply reliability and stuff breaking. It includes a lot of things like, how does the infotainment system work? Are there glitches in the infotainment? For instance, right here it says, Android Auto and Apple CarPlay connectivity remain the top problem in the industry for a second consecutive year, increasing from 8.4 problems per 100 vehicle increasing to 8.4 problems per 100 vehicles from 6.3 in 2024. So a decent portion of these scores is simply, does Apple CarPlay or Android Auto work? But as I've addressed before, is that the car? Is that the phone? Is it the software on the phone, that recent software update you did? Is it your cable? Is it Wi-Fi interference if you're wirelessly CarPlaying, etc.? We just don't know the answers to those questions. In addition to infotainment, the other sort of fuzzy category that's captured in the VDS is the driving experience, as they call it on their website. They're asking basically about how the car drives. Do you still like to drive it after 3 years? Does it all still handle well? All that sort of stuff. Is that a reliability question? Yes or no? I will let all of you decide, but I would go with no. And as a result, IQS and VDS are not pure reliability studies. That's the core thing to keep in mind. And they're not intended to, because you're not the intended customer for IQS or VDS results. Yes, they do publish them on a regular basis on their website. They're frequently talked about in all kinds of magazines, newspaper articles, etc. But you're not the intended customer for IQS and VDS. The manufacturer of the vehicle is the intended customer. And at this point in time, almost every major auto manufacturer that sells cars in the U.S. buys the data and assistance from J.D. Power sometimes in understanding the data and improving their products. J.D. Power is about selling that data back to the car companies. A lot of folks say, oh, J.D. Power awards are bought and paid for because they're licensed. Well, the licensing fees apparently account for a very small portion of J.D. Power's revenue. Most of the revenue that they make comes from selling these detailed results and or consulting services back to the car manufacturers so they can improve their products. And there have been examples in the past of issues that J.D. Power has uncovered in some of their surveys that manufacturers were able to go back and address and repair, etc. Some manufacturers, you'll notice, have climbed up the ladder of J.D. Power's IQS, their appeal studies and other things like that, really quite rapidly. Hyundai and Kia are among them. And that's simply because they're data-hungry companies, and they really wanted to understand American customer satisfaction. And yes, they wanted better ratings in these surveys and in these studies because they thought that would also help them make better products and attract and retain customers in a better fashion. But it absolutely does not mean that they're more reliable, according to these numbers, than the other vehicles, because we can't assess that. J.D. Power does not tell us of this number of problems per 100 vehicles, how many were car caught on fire, transmission fell out, squeaks and whatever because a wheel fell off on the highway. We don't know any of that. All we know is problems per 100 vehicles that includes things like the driving experience, infotainment system, smartphone connectivity, paint, finish, things like that. And I don't know if everybody would consider some of those items reliability. So that's the long and short of J.D. Power. It is not a conspiracy theory. It's not some weird pyramid scheme where they're buying and selling awards, etc. It is a data feedback system to vehicle manufacturers. If I were going to start building cars, I would absolutely want J.D. Power to survey and study my customers' cars and then get me back that data. It probably would be worth it. I don't know what J.D. Power charges. Hint, it's probably an awful lot. But I would want that data back because I now have the ability to have a third-party company out there collecting the data that's not one of my employees doing the surveying. They can be agnostic in this. They can be separated from the vehicle manufacturer, check out these same survey components, these same surveyed areas that other vehicles are ranked against, and then tell me how my vehicle stacks up in these categories, because that is valuable to me as an auto manufacturer. I can then improve my product, and then in my next vehicle refresh, I can address some of these complaints. And we certainly see that, for instance, in refreshed products. That happens an awful lot. I'm in presentations where the manufacturer says, based on customer data, we made changes A, B, C, D. Where did that customer data come from? Well, chances are it probably came from a J.D. Power survey right like this. But equating VDS or even IQS to reliability, that is a bit of a stretch. It's a further stretch with the IQS, but I would argue it is still a reasonable stretch with the VDS as long as J.D. Power is not telling us exactly what is in these categories. But as I said before, remember, we're not the customer. The people that are paying for this data, they're the ones that make this whole contraption work, and they seem to be just happy with the kind of data that they're getting. Sadly, we don't have access to that separation of sections in the data. Hope Hope that explains everything out there to you. Be sure and check out our other related videos. We take a deep dive into consumer reports, and we also talk about vehicle resale in some of these videos. If you want to know other topics of interest for us to do videos on, be sure and email us. Email address down there at the bottom of your screen. You can also send voice memos to 669-842-1947. You can call that number rather there. You can also send us voice memos to hey@autobuyersguide.com. See all of you in another episode.